On August 22nd, DeCarlos Brown stabbed Irina Zarutska, who was sitting in front of him on a bus. You can see in the video, she calmly walks in, sits down, and then he stabs her to death. But why? I mean, what could have possibly been the motivation for such a heinous and unprovoked attack? Well, according to one of the GoFundMe pages that was initially set up to defend the attacker, the true victim was apparently the man who stabbed the young woman. According to this narrative, DeCarlos Brown was failed categorically by the judicial system and mental health services of North Carolina, and as such, quote, not entirely to blame. Still, another commenter said that its intent was to raise funds to stop the injustice against DeCarlos Brown. Now, according to criminal records, this particular individual had been arrested about 14 times. His criminal record includes convictions for serious offenses such as armed robbery, for which he served a 5 to 6 year prison sentence and was released in 2020. It also included felony larceny, breaking and entering, shoplifting, assault, including assault on his own sister, communicating threats, injury to personal property, trespassing, disorderly conduct, and misuse of the 911 system. Many of his pre-2014 offenses were ultimately dropped, but he has been described across court records and news reports as a career criminal who spent much of his adult life cycling in and out of jail. And yet, he was out and about, continuing to break the law and apparently being diagnosed with schizophrenia. Now, you want to know the most amazing part of all of this? Major reporting on this story didn't pick up until weeks after it actually happened. That's right. A woman is brutally stabbed to death on public transportation in Charlotte, North Carolina, by a man described as a career criminal who had been recently released by a magistrate under a promise to appear order, murders a Ukrainian refugee, and every major press outlet just ignores it. Why would they do that? Well, it turns out they're not telling us why they did it, but I bet we can take some educated guesses as to the potential motivation for such silence. There is a lot for reasonable people to be furious at concerning this case. A career criminal with 14 arrests for a series of violent and nonviolent offenses, diagnosed with schizophrenia, murdering an innocent and defenseless woman on a train for no discernible reason begs a lot of questions. Why was he out? Why was he released from custody so easily after yet another charge? Why do we see people blaming the system instead of him? Why does this always seem to happen in cities or states with progressive district attorneys, mayors, legislatures, and governors? Perhaps one of the GoFundMe pages that blame the judicial and healthcare system actually has a point. But rather than those systems failing a murderer, they actually failed a young woman that should have been able to be reasonably safe on a public train. The problem seems to be in assuming that the criminal justice system exists primarily to rehabilitate criminals. It doesn't. It's not that rehabilitation isn't a worthy or reasonable objective, but it cannot be the primary reason the system exists. The criminal justice system must first and foremost exist to help prevent crime, to provide justice to victims, and to protect the rest of society from those who, for whatever reason, refuse to live in peace with others. But none of that explains why the media would cover up such a story. Except that the media, just like the progressive attorneys, judges, mayors, legislators, and chiefs of police, has spent the last several decades, and especially the last several years, suggesting otherwise. They have pushed a very different agenda, one where society is guilty when an individual commits a crime. Having supported this philosophy, they now bury the news that calls it into question. The problem, at least for these outlets, is that they don't control the narrative like they used to. And while that is bad news for them, it's ultimately good news for those of us who are tired of being blamed for crimes committed by others and who would like to live in a civilized society that values protecting innocent people more than those who terrorize them. So look, should the criminal justice system exist, at least in part, in order to rehabilitate? Certainly. But first, it has to protect innocent people from those who would harm them. And our media needs to take its responsibility seriously and report all the news rather than taking sides for a particular narrative.